I don't see the topic of theology discussed very often. And I guess what inspired me to call in and ask this is that I'm recently having some conversations with a theologian at the university that I attend, and in doing my due diligence, I tried to look into theology and find out, what it is they do, and what the steps that they take to produce their results are, and so on. And I myself am not a theist. I'm an atheist, and I guess the problem that I have is that I can't seem to see what theology does and what the results of it are, and it seems
you're in good company.
I mean, for that matter, I'm having a hard time trying to pin down the idea of what theology means apart from all the arguments that everybody, academics and non-academics alike, uses to justify their belief in God.
Sure, yeah.
What are you?
And sorry, and that was part of what the problem that I had is that it seems awfully like the presupposing God exists, and then carrying on the venture as so, well, it's been demonstrated, so it's all good.
It can be, but also, like, I know there are a number of atheists who were theology students or even theology professors, and I don't know this for sure, but I think I'm kind of led to conclude that theology isn't just an academic bucket for making arguments for God. It might also involve sort of the general study of what people believe and why, and the various myths and superstitions that have become entrenched in various cultures.
Yeah, I think you're better off with religious studies than theology.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. So there is this man in I forget what time he lived, I think the early 20th century, maybe late 19th century, by the name of Ambrose Bierce.
Oh yes, the Devil's Dictionary.
He wrote the Devil's Dictionary, and he defines theology as a thing of unreason altogether, an edifice of assumptions and dreams, a superstructure without a substructure. And I think that nails it quite well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just looked it up. It seems like an apt definition.
But you said you talked to a theologian. What did he tell you? His
that's a good thing to do.
Field is about.
And I quote when I say this. I pitched the question saying, well, I had a rough look up as to what theology is defined as, and there's obviously, as if you do your own search, there's thousands of definitions for it, but most of them seem to say something along the lines of the study of the divine or the study of God. And so I said, do you follow along this definition? And his response was, well, the question of whether God exists or not, because I was saying, well, if you agree to that definition, then how do we know that that God actually exists? Shouldn't that be the question we answer first before going ahead and then carrying on studying with
there you go.
With theology?
Otherwise, you're studying nothing, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the response was, well, that's not really an interesting question. The question would be, what does it mean to speak of God?
That is a good question, I guess. What does it mean?
Yeah. But then I sort of kept coming back to the point saying, well, that's nice, but shouldn't we really have established the existence of God first for that to be a meaningful question? And I guess, he wasn't really too keen on doing that.
Yeah. I'm laughing because I would have loved to have listened in on that conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I'm an atheist and I am anti-theist to some extent, but I try to do it in a respectful way. So I try to, be fair in my approach when I'm talking with either theists or in this case a theologian to try and be like, well, okay, I've done my due diligence, so I've looked up and done a bit of research into what I'm talking about, or the subject matter. But when it comes to theology, either it's hugely complex and I don't get it, or I'm just not seeing where the actual validity in the venture is, other than
we're with you.
If you
we're with you on this.
Assume that God exists, and therefore that makes the entire, considering it is an academic discipline. It's not just a subject under philosophy of religion.
Kind of. I mean, there was an interview with Douglas Adams by David Silverman in 1999 or so that I always like to quote, where Douglas Adams was noticing that there was a big difference between the theology department members and all the other disciplines, because in all the other disciplines like history or science or anything that actually studies something, they're always arguing and looking for details and trying to nail down what they mean and why something happened. But then in theology, it winds up being considered sort of impolite or inappropriate to ask for something as simple as a definition of what you're talking about. And he said, I wondered why why religion in particular got this special pass to not have arguments against it. And I realized it's because it never would stand up to it.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Would you say that this is my personal thought on theology in general, is would you say that the reason that it's considered a discipline within academia at the moment is because it has like dread remnant leftovers from the historical prevalence of religion, and
I think
therefore
so,
because
it's like a vestigial organ, right, that hasn't quite been excised.
Well said.
From an academia.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, because it would seem like obviously over the past hundreds or thousands of years that people did consider it a valid venture, and therefore it was steeped in any academic venture. But now, of course, we're arguably past the age of enlightenment, although that's debatable.
Of course, the problem, one of the many problems with shying away from the responsibility to define the thing that you're supposed to be studying, is that it really leaves the door open for everybody to pretty much make up what they think that thing is. You can look no further than that caller that we had like half an hour ago, who was just saying, oh yeah, well, I think that God, little g, is just whatever you like the most. Sure, it could be donuts or whatever.
And that is his theology. And so one man's theology is just as good as any other because there's no grounding.
Yeah, and I think if you came up to this theology professor and said, hey, I've discovered the truth, God is donuts.
That's right.
And he said, well, that's ridiculous. No, it's not. Then you could say, well, you won't give me a definition, so why can't I go with that one? It just seems like, they want to act like this is a serious, rigorous field of study until you actually start trying to nail down anything, and then all of a sudden it's vague and
Yeah, indeed. Or a common response is to attempt to juxtapose it next to other valid fields of research and say, well, if you're going to question the validity of theology, then you're going to start questioning the validity of mathematics, which is
sorry, your discipline is not that good.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, so I just struggle. I mean, I don't want to sound. I mean, obviously, it's a difficult proposition to present to someone who's obviously studied it for I don't know how many years. He's older than I am, so I can imagine he's been in the field of theology for some 10, 15 plus years.
Yeah, I think for another difference between theology and other disciplines is that if you corner somebody who's super interested in computer science data structures, for instance. That's a really complicated topic, but I'm sure that if you ask them, they will talk your ear off and try to explain it in a way that you can understand. They may not be good at it, they may be boring, but they are at least interested in making their topic understandable. If you ask a theologian, he'll start yammering on about mysteries. And I think that's a sign that they don't really understand it themselves. They're just very good at convincing other people that they do.
Yeah, indeed. And also if you highlight the fact that that theology or the existence of God has been and is still debated over thousands of years, and we have yet to reach any sort of conclusive evidence to suggest that he does exist. My argument would be if theology hinges on the existence of God, which has not been demonstrated, isn't it sort of dishonest to then carry on as though it has been demonstrated and that the field is still a legitimate field of study? I would pitch that question to anybody if there are any theists or theologians out there.
No, I think you're making great points.
I'm right there with you, but unfortunately we are out of time.
Yeah, no, that's all good. That's all good. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for that. I'm just glad to finally get through.
We're just as puzzled as you are.
Yep.
We're just
Thank you for calling.